Hi, my name is Jake Nail, and this is my 2021 Great Guitar Build-Off intro. I've been calling it Stripes. Stripes is the 5th electric guitar I've built, but it's based off the first one I built just about a year ago. I took that same basic shape, but I wanted to do something different, and this is what I came up with. In this video, I'm going to show you the entire process of building it, and then at the end, I'll give you a short sound demo. And then if you like it, and you feel so inclined, I'd appreciate your vote. So without further ado, let's get to how I built this. Thanks for watching. So I started by cutting an angle in my blanks of poplar and mahogany, and then I took those blanks and using a fence, I just cut them into strips. It's a very fancy fence, by the way. After that, I ran them over to the jointer, and then pretty much all I had to do was flip-flop the blocks and assemble it. In my glue up, I was gonna clamp it all at once, but that wasn't quite working, and so I just had to do one piece at a time. But as you can see here, I had some trouble with my fancy new glue bottle. The trouble was I forgot to snip the cover off of the squirt end. From there, it was pretty easy just to squirt the pieces on and then glue them up one at a time. That took a little bit, but eventually I ended up with a full blank made of those pieces, like that. After that, I planed it down to make sure they were all the same thickness, and then it was time to cut it out on the bandsaw. Cutting out the body is one of my favorite parts of building a guitar. It's where I can really start to see it come together. After I finished cutting it out on the bandsaw, I took it over to my router, and I just routed it to its final shape. After getting it to its final shape, it was time to route out for electronics, and I know, looking at this in hindsight, I did this really wrong. I should have clamped it down, I should have secured it. That would have made it go a lot smoother and I probably would have got a better result, but this is the electronics in the neck pocket, and you'll see here in a second what happened because I was not being great with the router. So it's about 10 p.m. here. I figured I was going to finish up some routing. It was mainly going okay. And I'm not sure what happened, but I think one of my router bits was fairly messed up because when I took it off after this happened, it just pretty much fell apart on me. And it must have been at least a little bit falling apart when I was using it because I was working on the back here and I got some gnarly tear out. You can kind of see some of the effects of it there. And I guess I know what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to have to well, I've already started. I routed away basically this whole upper section here. And when I do a cover, instead of doing a circular cover, I'm just going to have to do a whole cover on this whole section. But I've still got a lot of cleaning up to do, and that's pretty disheartening right now. It was going pretty well. So we'll see what. So the next day, to take a break from that and to get some extra wood cut-offs, I used some cut-off pieces to put together a neck blank. Here, after I trimmed it out, I'm trimming off a piece to, 1, get thickness for the neck, and 2, get a piece for the fretboard. After that, I just planed them down to the thickness I wanted them to be, both the neck blank and the fretboard blank. That's why I'm doing 2 pieces and 1 pretty thin. Then I could cut out the neck on my bandsaw. After cutting out on the bandsaw, I gave it its final shape using my table router. And after we finished routing that, I decided to move to the fretboard. This was the first fretboard I've ever made, so this was a little nerve-wracking, but it came out pretty alright. I used a jig that I bought online. I'll link that in the description if you're interested in it, and it was really easy. I just clamped it and sawed them. After that, I routed for the truss rod, and after getting the truss rod put in, it was time for glue up. I really enjoy the gluing up part, especially now that I have some spool clamps. Spool clamps, which are these ones I'm using now, I think are some of the most useful clamps that I have had since I've made them. Then while I'm waiting for that, it's always nice. Once that was glued up, I trimmed off the extra fretboard pieces with my bandsaw and then got them perfectly flush with my router. Then I got to go inside because I needed some AC, and I marked out where I was putting all the fret dots. Now, I had to go to another shop to put in the fret dots and to drill for them, but that's what it ended up looking like. I didn't get any video of that. After I got fret dots, it was time for carving. And more carving. and even more carving after that. And then finally some sanding. I had the basic shape done of my neck after that. After that, I put the radius with a radius block from StewMac. I'm gonna try and find a different way to do this next time because that took a bit. So it's been a while since I showed this part. The upper corner I messed up. I've been working on the neck so I could get some extra pieces of wood. And I didn't really video any of this because it took a lot of experimenting and a lot of messing around with what I was gonna do. What I ended up doing was I just routed off basically the entire upper section. You can also see here where I had some more tear out and had to do a couple patches, and I cleaned that up a little bit. Still got a little bit more, but essentially that's just gonna attach right there, and it'll more or less match up. I still got some cleaning up to do, but for that mess up I did, I'm pretty happy. I also, over here, I had a little bit of tear out that I had to clean up a little bit, but I was able to get a matching piece there that I'm gonna get cleaned up here pretty soon. After that, it was time for some shaping and covering the body that I wasn't able to do because I didn't have that upper part flush. I trimmed off my cover, and then I put a round over the whole body. After I was able to round over the whole body, it was time for carving. I didn't do anything too intense on the body, but I wanted a couple of comfort cuts there, so I put one on the front and a very small one on the back. And then this is the first time I've tried this next one, and I haven't decided how much I like it yet, but it was really easy to do because I just had that sander. After that, I decided to work on that cover that I had been working on. I wanted to attach this with magnets because it seemed easier and prettier than screws in my mind. I just ordered some magnets online and made a template. Easy peasy. And it helped. After that, it was time for more sanding. And more sanding after that. And some sanding after that too. Halfway through sanding, I realized that I forgot to drill some holes, and so I took the opportunity to do that mid-sanding. Just drilling for the tailpiece in the bridge, and while I was at it, I went ahead and drilled through for the jack. Then I finished off some sanding, and then it was time to fill that grain. I mixed up some grain filler and wiped it on. I wiped it on a little too heavy, so next time I'll make sure I'm a little lighter with it. That made sanding it off here take a little bit of time. I sanded it down and then wiped it off more, and then it was time to spray some sealer. Sprayed some sealer on it. Sorry about the strobe effect, that was a light I was using. After that sealer dried, we sanded that back just a little bit, and then it was time for the first coat of clear. Before clear coating the neck, I had to put the frets in, so I went ahead and did that. I don't usually use glue, but some of the fret slots were a little wide from having to resaw them, so I did this time. After that, I had one final touch before spraying, and that was putting the label on the neck. It's another one of my favorite parts of the build. It's a nice checkpoint towards the end. Well, at least it feels that way. You might notice I'm missing a couple frets. That is because I did not order enough fret wire. Then it was time to spray the neck down. I just figured I'd deal with those frets later, and honestly, it was not as hard as I thought it would be to put them on after I finished the neck. After getting a couple more coats to clear coat, it was time for wet sanding. I did wet sanding on the neck and the body, and then I used a buffing attachment to my drill to give it a little bit of a shine. I did not really buff out the neck because it honestly didn't need it, but after that, it was time for shielding before I did the wiring. And then halfway through shielding, I realized that I forgot to drill a bunch of holes in the body, like the holes for the pots and the switch and for wires. So I took the opportunity to go ahead and do that, and then after that, it was just a matter of installing stuff after I finished up that shielding. I ran a wire to that tailpiece just for grounding, and then I got the bridge pieces in. Then I had some trouble with one of the posts for the bridge, and so I took a hammer to it, which was not smart, because you'll see here, I could not get that to go on. It took me about half an hour. After I finally figured that out, it was time for wiring up. I started by wiring up just the grounds. one at a time. Nothing too complicated. After that, I ran some wires up through the guitar for the switch. I made sure to cut them just a little bit long, just in case. Now you get to see me finagling around this small piece for the switch. One advantage of really messing up that whole upper part is I was able to make that switch hole a lot bigger, and it was easier for me to get around in. After that, I just wired up the humbucker and you're pretty much good to go. It did take me a minute to get some of those finagled where they needed to be. After that, we moved to the neck. I installed the tuning machines. These are some D'Addarios. They have this really cool thing where they snip the string off for you. I've never seen that before, so I decided to give it a try, and it's a really handy feature. And then it was time to string it up. And if you'll deal with me playing, here's how it sounds.